Welcome to our daily reflection for this Thursday, December 26th, which is the feast of Saint Stephen, the first martyr. And even though we're in this great Christmas season, the church doesn't want to lose honoring Stephen, who is the very first of the martyrs. And so his story, how does it fit into Christmas? How does it connect with the season now? Well, one thing could be, I think it gives us a perspective on how Jesus changed the world and what his coming at Christmas as King, as Messiah, how that works and how we can misunderstand how it works. You know, you could think that, well, Jesus comes to be the King, to reign, and to take away our problems, to take away our suffering, and so that we don't have to suffer. And so wait a minute then. Wait, Stephen, early on in the church, full of wisdom and righteousness, ends up being martyred. He gets killed. How is that good, right? So there's still evil in the world. There's still the problem of suffering and death. So has Jesus, with his birth, changed the world really at all? And I think we need to reflect on that. And I think the first thing to say is that Jesus didn't come into the world as a substitute sacrifice, that now he takes on all the punishment and suffering and death, and we don't have to suffer anymore. He's not a substitute that takes our place. He's our Lord, and he goes before us, and his road is suffering and persecution, and he gives a witness, a martyria to the Father, and dies. And Jesus dies not so that we don't have to die and suffer. He suffers and dies so that our suffering and death will be meaningful. In other words, Jesus goes before us on the road of the cross so that we too may take up our cross and follow him faithfully to do the will of the Father, even if that requires suffering and even death. And so Jesus, in other words, shows us the way and gives us the way to be faithful to the Father in obedience of faith, even obedience unto death. And that's what Stephen witnesses. Stephen is faithful even amidst the persecution, even by being put on trial and suffering. He is faithful to Jesus. He's faithful to the will of the Father, and he calls out to Jesus, and Jesus even grants him, and he gets a vision. He sees Jesus in heaven, seated at the right hand of the Father. So we see that Jesus is King, and he's at the right hand of the Father. And behold, he says that the heavens open up and the Son of Man is standing at the right hand of God. And he cries out to God. And he even asks Jesus and God to forgive his enemies. And of course, who's the enemy at the foot of at the execution of Stephen? A man named Saul, who every man puts their garments at his feet. In other words, Saul is sanctioning the death and execution of Stephen. Well, Stephen prays to Jesus for forgiveness for his enemies, and that request is answered. Jesus, at the right hand of the Father, receives that prayer of Stephen. He answers it, and Saul will be given the grace of conversion. And Jesus will appear to Saul on the road to Damascus, and Saul will become St. Paul, the greatest evangelist. Why? And why did we get St. Paul? Because Stephen prayed to Jesus, who's at the right hand of the Father. And so we see that Stephen is faithful to Jesus. So Jesus comes into the world obedient to the Father so that we too may become obedient to the Father, even if it means loss and suffering. Jesus makes our suffering meaningful. He makes our death redemptive. And so that is to give us hope. And so I think it has a lot to do with Jesus' kingship and Jesus' faith. And the prayer of Stephen is Psalm 31, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." And that's what Jesus did, and that's what we are invited to do, to commend our spirit into the hands of the Father and to obey the Father no matter where that leads. And faith is about a wholehearted gift of self to God, an entrustment of self to God. Stephen witnesses that. Jesus, of course, embodies that when he enters at the incarnation and is born in obedience to the Father. May we follow in their footsteps. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.